Hi, everyone. It looks like it's 11 o'clock Central Time, so it's time to begin Facebook Live with Build Up Dietitians, and I am happy to be a part of it. I hope that you can hear me okay. I got everything quiet here. You're hearing me from my home office, so um, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I'm Carol Ireton Jones, and let me tell you a little bit about me. I actually, way back when, I thought I wanted to be an artist, and behind me, let's see, over this shoulder, you can, well, how do I do that? There we go. You can see a painting that I did when I was a senior in high school, which is why I'm now a dietitian, because art was meant to be a hobby. So I went to Texas Tech University and got my undergraduate degree and did a CUP program there, which was amazing. And as many of us know, you become great, great friends with your colleagues. Then I came back to Dallas. I worked at Parkland Hospital in the burn unit, and I got my master's at Texas Women's University. Worked with a wonderful, wonderful guy named George Leopa, and finished with a thesis on how many calories burn patients needed. Dr. Leopa kept telling me to go back and get a PhD, and I told him if I couldn't buy it, I wasn't going to do it. But he did talk me into it, and I got my PhD in from Texas Women's University, and I did a great study that some of you may know. And I just was going to mention it because I know a lot of people talk about or have asked me about it. I did this study. It was equations for the estimation of energy expenditure in patients with burns with special relevance to ventilatory status. I want you to know that these turned out to be the Ireton Jones equations because I'm the first author. Very exciting, and have been used. They're used now nationally and internationally, so very exciting. And then the second, my next career was I worked in research at UT Southwestern for a long time, measuring metabolic rates and doing more research. Then I worked in home infusion for enteral and parenteral nutrition patients for many years, I think 10 or so. And since 2008, I've been a consultant and in private practice. So this is my home office. I actually do have a consult office that is very nice, and that's where I see my GI patients usually. So with that gives you a little bit of information about me. I will certainly answer any questions that you might have, and I can see some are coming up here. One question is my interest in GI. I think GI has come up because working with the burn patients, we used enteral and parenteral nutrition support a lot. And through that, I understood that the GI tract became very important, and management of the nutrients that you were providing so that you wouldn't have complications such as diarrhea, constipation, etc., with enteral or with parenteral nutrition, hyperglycemia, etc. Now, I worked in the time of parenteral and enteral nutrition when if some was good, a lot was better. And that was a big part of my initial study on burn patients, that we were overfeeding them. And that was published in '82. And then as well, the Ireton Jones equations, which actually also helped to pinpoint that patients needed probably less calories than we thought they did. So enteral and parenteral nutrition, and then in my private practice, a lot of GI, IBS. Very well remember reading an article and finding this lovely dietitian, Patsy Katzos, who taught me the low FODMAP diet. And since then, with Patsy and Kate Scarlotta, I have learned quite a bit more about the low FODMAP diet. I use it all the time in my practice. I also think it helps people that besides IBS because it treats GI symptoms, which lots of our patients get, including celiac patients, short bowel syndrome. So I use it a lot. And I also work quite a bit with short bowel syndrome patients. I really enjoy those patients. Many of them are receiving parenteral nutrition and trying to figure out what to eat. So helping them with proper diet choices has been very helpful. And it's interesting with short bowel, when somebody's already has enough challenges, how do you make the short bowel syndrome diet appropriate but not too restrictive? So one of my colleagues who I appreciate her expertise very well, Carol Parrish, often talks about that as well. So pick a few things and do the best you can in helping guide your patients as best as possible with the short bowel syndrome diet and others. Some other areas that I have been interested in, and probably you all, if you know me, you know that I like metabolism. And I have had an indirect calorimeter since, gosh, for a very long time, I don't want to say. I actually, when I did my study of my master's patients in the burn unit that was published in '82, I did indirect calorimetry the old way. I actually had Douglas bags that the patients would breathe into, and I would time it, and I'd take them over to the lab and analyze them by actually even using a TSO spirometer to measure how much air was in those bags and do all the calculations myself. Oh, am I glad we have indirect calorimeters now. So I used one in the burn unit and in surgery, and actually all over Parkland Hospital. And since then, in my private practice, I've had one. I use it all the time. I'm actually using it right now. I happen to have a review, and I use that in a study that I'm doing with a weight loss program, but I use it often with my patients. So it's really great to be able to measure metabolic rate. I think that is something that is missing. And if you look in the Aspen guidelines, it states that we should measure energy expenditure even in our critical care patients. Yet, not very many people have a metabolic cart. So I think that's a great place for dietitians. We could absolutely measure metabolic rate or take the information from some of the ventilators that have an indirect calorimeter built in and make those recommendations. That's what I did at Parkland all those years ago, working with the nutrition support team and Dr. Bill Turner, who is still at UT Southwestern. So those are some of the things that I like. I will tell you a bit of is it a pet peeve? I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's something that all of us as dietitians need to be very careful with, very cognitive of, and that is evidence-based practice. Our practice has to be separate from anyone else because, as you know, we're registered dietitians, but anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. So I do love the fact that we're registered dietitian nutritionist. I adopted that right away. But we have to practice evidence-based nutrition. One thing I like to say is testimonials do not equal evidence. And my favorite quote on that is, I could tell you that beets are bad for you. I don't think that they are, but they're bad for me because I don't like them. So if I told you beets were bad, that's my testimonial, but that has no evidence behind it except that I don't like beets, although I will eat them sometimes. So you see, I'm not good about that. So evidence-based is one of my favorite things. I just had something interesting come up is I always talk about be sure you get something from a peer-reviewed journal. So I had a colleague tell me about his peer-reviewed journal and showed me and said, oh, and by the way, the way it's peer reviewed, I have a couple of PhDs look at it, and then and then we'll publish it, and I can give you a great price on that. That's not exactly what is peer reviewed and evidence-based based on what we talk about in scientific evidence-based. And one more thing, I've written a few books. This was the one that I've actually written by myself, Outpatient Nutrition Care and Home Nutrition Support, Practical Guidelines for Assessment and Management. And so this has more than just home nutrition support, which is one of my loves. But there's a chapter on diabetes, there's a chapter on IBS, celiac disease, and it's been quite popular. We're going into our second edition, starting to write that coming, I guess the next couple of years. So it's okay, you can still get it now, but there'll be another edition as well. I'm just going to take a look at one of these questions here. Oh, that's so interesting. Danielle has mentioned that she worked somewhere where they had a metabolic cart, but they said no one was formally trained to do it, so to use the machine, so they couldn't use it. I think that happens all the time. That happened when I left Parkland and moved to work in home infusion. I think the metabolic cart was parked, and if there wasn't somebody who knew how to do the studies and then also interpret it, because these machines will give you data no matter what. So you have to have somebody who knows how to run the machine, make sure it's an accurate test, and then also analyze the data that comes from it and apply it. But I actually think that there's no reason why we can't learn how to do it. They're not that difficult. And a company that makes those machines will usually have somebody who could come out and train you on it. It's not that difficult to do. When I first started doing it at Parkland, I did a lot of it on my own, but then I got respiratory involved in it, and they began to do more of the tests. It was so great to have respiratory there to do it. So many of you, and that was in particular on the ventilator-dependent patients. So I would say that there is no reason why you can't learn to do the testing. It's making sure you have a good test is like any testing that you would do. You make sure that the connections are correct, the machine is calibrated, you watch the patient, you watch the test, and then you get the information from it. So for me, I guess I was kind of a pioneer in doing those myself, but you absolutely can do that. So I think you should. So go find that machine and see if it can be calibrated. If it can be calibrated, boy, what a great thing. Because what I found, and I think you'll find too, is I remember seeing some of our smaller patients that came in, but they came in on the respiratory side. They needed more calories than someone that might have been larger, but had less difficulty with breathing and such as that. Now, I haven't done inpatients in a long time. I'm totally outpatients since 2008, but that's been also very interesting. In my private practice, I have a few people who come to me and they say, you know, I have a low metabolic rate. I've tried to lose weight and I really can't. So it's really my low metabolism. So we measure them and we find out that their metabolic rate is certainly within the realm that we would consider in the normal range, comparing it to the Mifflin St. George, for example. I think that's very, very helpful. I do have some people who come in and they've been on low-calorie diets, yo-yo diets, and their metabolic rates are effective. They're lower than I would have expected. So I think that's also been very helpful. And then my favorite, and all of us as dietitians would probably agree that having some concrete information to show a patient really helps. So come in, measure a patient, let's say this male or female needs 1,600 calories at rest. So you'd add a few calories to that. I usually add about 30% to get what they need on a daily basis. So that'd be 2,000 calories or 1,900 or something like that. So when this person says, well, I never eat more than 1,200 calories a day and I'm gaining weight, you actually have something concrete to say. Energy in equals energy out. So you're probably actually eating more calories than you realize. And usually they kind of needed somebody to tell them, well, okay, I might snack a little bit here. And well, yeah, I don't actually count my morning protein shake. It's just milk, protein, fruit. And then once we calculate this, it's a lot more calories than they thought. So, I think that this is one of those concrete things that we can have to share with our patients. And you can do it even if you're just calculating their calories. You can show them what their calories are at rest. And if they say, well, I constantly eat less than this and I don't lose weight, I don't think we've found any way to prove that actually happens in reality. So I understand it's a challenge, but this is one of those things that helps. Are there any other questions? Anything else that is coming up for anyone? Because as you can see, I can continue to talk. I have a question about how do you get into home health care? There are many companies that provide home health now. There are nursing groups, there's DME companies, there's home infusion companies. And the greatest thing over the years has been that they understand if they provide enteral or parenteral nutrition, they really need a registered dietitian to help them. So I think look at the companies that are in your area and contact them. Network with dietitians in your area, network with the other disciplines. If you work in a hospital, you may know some nurses who also work with home care companies. Our biggest challenge in home care and home infusion is that we're not a covered entity. So we are, as registered dietitians, we are expenses. But what we can do to help make sure a patient is on the appropriate formula, enteral in particular, but parenteral as well. I've worked with a lot of parenteral patients who I've been able to help them manage what they eat so they have less output, so they're more successful on their parenteral nutrition. So I think even if you need to go online and get some stories from other dietitians who've been very successful, you can use those. If you're not familiar with parenteral nutrition and those are the patients that you're going to be working with, I'd suggest going online and looking for some CE programs. Come to the Aspen meeting, come to your local Aspen chapter meetings. There's online studies. I know Aspen has those, others do. Dietitians and Nutrition Support through the Academy, two of my favorites. So you will need to do some training. Another thing that dietitians are great in home health and home nutrition support is great salespeople because we understand the clinical sales behind it. So I think there are lots of opportunities for dietitians in home care. And what about if you want to start a private practice? I think there's lots of resources for you as well to understand how to start a private practice. Biggest part is where are you going to do this? I don't really want people to come to my home office, even though, as you can see, it's great, but they have to like dogs, and cats if they come here. So that's kind of a problem sometimes. But so I have rented an office. I love my office, and it was pretty easy to furnish as well. So you need to figure out where you might see your patients, what your office rent would be, and then what you will do as far as billing. Will you charge the patients and have them self-pay, or will you be part of insurance? That used to be such a problem, but I have found that dietitians have really come forth, and they are helping each other in providing information through networking on how you can charge or become part of insurance programs, how you charge your patients, and they're even having CE programs. So it really is something that I think all of us can do. And I'm just going to put a plug in. We need more dietitians out here in the private practice sector. And we need you to be really good because there are a lot of patients who are out here and need you. I, in particular, as you have heard, GI is my thing, and there are not enough GI dietitians who work outpatient. I know many of you are great and you're working in these hospitals, yay! But we need you out here. And just because you took one course or you read this great book and there's 3 GI chapters, that doesn't mean you're a great GI dietitian. So you need some practice. Please, if that's an interest of yours, think about moving into the outpatient setting. Bond with some dietitians. When one of the things I did during my time in trying to be a private practice dietitian, even a little bit, was I found a dietitian who was willing to give me a day at her office. I paid her rent for a day, and so I worked there. Maybe that's what you want to do. I think that GI is really important. I've started a small group called Digestive Nutrition Group. It's www.digestivenutritiongroup.com, and we are trying to put together dietitians who are excellent in GI so that our patients, when they're looking for a good GI dietitian, they'll find one, because we will all be on one website. That's in development, but hopefully we'll be coming out, we'll be more active soon. Let's see, is there anything else that, let's see. Someone had asked a question about on tube feedings, is it better to have real food or these blenderized formulas? And I think that is where the dietitian is absolutely important, is to help our clinicians, our other clinicians, and our patients understand which one is best for them. About 4 years ago, I had the most wonderful woman come to my office. She just wanted to make sure that the blenderized tube feeding that she was making for her husband was nutritionally adequate. So I scheduled her up for an hour meeting, and she did pay out of pocket for this. When I realized how complex that blenderized tube feeding was that she was making, and how complex it was to make sure we were meeting the nutrients, I made her come back the next day, no charge, and we worked together to make sure we had a nutritionally complete formula. You can do that, and I would just recommend, we actually wrote an article about this. It's on the OLEY website, that's OLEY. So it's www.oley.org. And you can Google or search for our article on blenderized tube feeding. What we did there is we took blenderized tube feeding. Maybe you want to do all of that, all the way down to just using a commercial tube feeding and all the variations between. So there's some formulas that are commercial blenderized tube feedings. There are some that are just may substitute for meals. There's a real variety. I think that it would be very difficult to do a blenderized tube feeding every day. I know some people do, but it would be very difficult. So I would always, my recommendation is have some commercial available for those days where you might have a challenge, not have enough time to make a formula at home, or you're traveling or whatever. Or there's an emergency preparedness. Keep some cans on board so that you can feed. If they're, I know we're already seeing the tornadoes coming and the bad weather, the snow. So keep something on hand just in case. Well, I think that I've talked your arm off for a while. I hope I've answered some of the questions that you have had. Again, I think being a dietitian is the best thing that ever happened. I'm so glad that my art didn't turn out to be as good as I thought it was. I could still paint anytime I want, but being a dietitian has been wonderful. You really do help people, and you make great colleagues, whether it's the dietitian crew or the entire group of people that you meet. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, techs. Wow, there's just been so many people. It's been a wonderful, wonderful career. And I see, let me see if I can figure out now. Okay, you can see over here, I have fruit hanging. Yes, low-hanging fruit from my from one of my cabinets. This is what you get from your patients. One of my long-term PN consumers sent me those. Yep, those are my fruits there. I guess those are the fruits of my labor. But these are some of the other things you get by being a registered dietitian. So thank you so much, Build Up Dietitians, for letting me be a part of this. And if you guys have any questions for me, my website is carolireton-jones.com, or email me at drcijrd@gmail.com. Everybody, have a great day. Stay warm. And I wish everyone a happy National Nutrition Month. Take care.